Yo, what is going on, you guys, and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video, we're going to be going over what villains are likely to appear in Spider-Man freshman year. But before we go into that, if you are interested in clothing based off solely on superhero designs, then I give you I Am Superhero. It's a clothing brand that has designs based off your favorite superheroes from Spider-Man, Batman, and many more. I'll leave a link in the description down below if you want to go and check it out. With that being said, let's get straight into the video. Now, I already loosely covered this on my other Spider-Man freshman year video where I went over everything that we already knew about the show. So if you want to know everything about the show and everything that we know, then click the eye icon at the top right hand corner of the screen at the end of this video to check that out. But obviously, with that being said, we're going to be going into the villains specifically in this video in a lot more detail and exploring the possibilities. So here are the villains that could potentially show up in Spider-Man freshman year and why. Number 1, Hammerhead. I think Hammerhead is a decent shout and probably one of the more likely options to appear in this show. Hammerhead is one of those characters that is very popular when it comes to the Spider-Man fandom, but hasn't really had his chance to shine properly as a main villain of sorts. Yes, he's been in the Spider-Man TV shows before and he was in the PS4 game, but he hasn't really had his time to shine in his own spotlight as a main villain before. And what better way to introduce Hammerhead to Spider-Man in the MCU than to have him fight him in Spider-Man freshman year. As we know, Spider-Man freshman year is going to be about Peter Parker's origin becoming Spider-Man in the MCU before Civil War. So based off this information, we know that Spider-Man can't really be fighting any villains that are at a higher tier level, and Vulture is going to be our benchmark for that. Knowing how Spider-Man fared up against Vulture in Homecoming, we know that he can't be facing anything more than that. So higher A-list tier villains like Venom, Hobgoblin, and villains like that are all off the table here. So Hammerhead is probably one of the better shouts for a villain in Spider-Man freshman year. Hammerhead also brings a lot of other qualities with him as well, that he's a really good henchman and actually does kind of have a superpower of his own, even though it might just be a metal plate in his head. He could provide some really cool action scenes with an inexperienced Spider-Man, and I think them two would go toe-to-toe with each other and would be a good match for one another. So yeah, Hammerhead is probably my first pick for a big villain in Spider-Man freshman year. Number 2, the Kingpin. Now, we know the Kingpin and his inclusion from Daredevil means he is now in the MCU. However, in terms of the Daredevil storyline, having Kingpin show up in Spider-Man freshman year wouldn't really work with the timeline of the new MCU. As based off our knowledge to where Daredevil probably fits within the MCU, Kingpin is most likely in prison at this time. However, we know Kingpin does show up in Hawkeye, so we never know when he could be showing up. Kingpin, once again like Hammerhead, would be a very good villain to use in Spider-Man freshman year for the very same reasons. Kingpin is the master of underground crime when it comes to New York. However, like I had said before, because of Daredevil and now them being included within the MCU, having him be the Spider-Man freshman year villain and then trying to make that make sense with the Daredevil storyline really doesn't match up too well. And this is one of the problems that we will face if Kingpin does ever show up with Spider-Man in the MCU at whatever point. This is always going to be an issue regarding Daredevil and Kingpin when it comes to Spider-Man. So the likelihood of Kingpin being the villain of freshman year is very unlikely. However, using Kingpin in freshman year would be a very good choice in terms of a villain for Spider-Man to fight and face up against before he goes up against Vulture in Spider-Man Homecoming. Kingpin is always going to be a good option for a start-out villain for Spider-Man, and I think he would work really, really well in freshman year. Number 3 is an alternative to Kingpin and Hammerhead in the same way, and that could be Tombstone. We saw Tombstone in the Spectacular Spider-Man take on a bigger role as a main villain, and Tombstone has proved that he can be a character that can be expanded upon. Tombstone is one of those characters that can really be taken in any sort of direction you want, as there's not a lot of character traits that really tie him down to being any certain way. And we know the MCU likes to take popular characters and kind of rewrite them into their own narrative, so Tombstone could be a good character to work with here. I could see the MCU almost creating a brand new villain out of the name Tombstone and really driving him forward as a main villain for Spider-Man in Spider-Man freshman year. Once again, Tombstone would be a very good antagonist for Spider-Man, as once again, like we did say, he would be the perfect villain for Spider-Man to go up against before he goes up against the likes of Vulture. Number 4, Black Cat. Now, Black Cat could be a cool character to introduce within Spider-Man freshman year. Not a villain as such, but someone that could definitely go toe-to-toe with Spider-Man in this series. Although it could be a little bit too early to introduce someone like Black Cat, I think she could be a cool villain to introduce to the MCU this early, and then she could potentially return in the next Spider-Man trilogy within the MCU, thus giving her origin story as well before we explore a future story for her in the future of the cinematic universe. Plus, if we expand that mobster story like we said with Hammerhead, Kingpin, and Tombstone, Black Cat could be the perfect character to be introduced here, as she is a big part of that story in the comics. Number 5, the Enforcers. The Enforcers seem like a very good group of villains to have in Spider-Man freshman year. They tick all the boxes, especially when it comes to them not being as powerful as the Vulture, and them being very low-level C-list, maybe even D-list villains. The Enforcers actually did make an appearance in Spider-Man Homecoming through Montana, who was the first Shocker to get disintegrated by Adrian Toomes in the film. Montana, before going on to work with Adrian Toomes, could have been working with the Enforcers, doing day-to-day crimes before being recruited by Adrian Toomes. Montana and the Enforcers could be working together and could just be random jewel thieves that Spider-Man has to chase and take down. It'd be a very simple story. Once again, Spider-Man would go toe-to-toe with them as he'd be very inexperienced, and I think it would provide a very cool chase action story. One where Spider-Man would be learning the ropes on how to deal with criminals on that level, before going off to fight villains like the Vulture, as we've said many times now. Number 6, the Chameleon. The Chameleon is a good option for Spider-Man freshman year only because he was Spider-Man's first villain in the comics in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 1. I think this would pay homage to that villain. However, there is one issue with Chameleon being the villain of freshman year. Dimitri, who was in Spider-Man Far From Home, is supposedly actually meant to be the Chameleon, and although that story was never expanded upon going forward into No Way Home, there is still potentially the idea for Chameleon to make a return in a future film. However, if there are no plans to bring Dimitri back for a future Spider-Man film in the MCU, then the Chameleon could make an appearance as a separate character in Spider-Man freshman year. Number 7, Mac Gargan. Now, I do think this one is highly unlikely because I do think, and I'm very convinced, that Mac Gargan, aka the Scorpion, will be a big feature of the new MCU Spider-Man trilogy, and he'll most likely be heavily involved with the symbiote storyline in the MCU as well. However, Mac Gargan could make an appearance in Spider-Man freshman year as a villain because obviously, as seen in Homecoming, he is a mobster and he does make weapons deals with Adrian Toomes. So there is a chance that he could be a villain here as well. However, I do think this is highly unlikely, as he probably will be used going forward in the MCU. Number 8, Sin Eater. Now, this is a villain that not many people really know about. However, Sin Eater was involved in the death of Jean DeWolf's storyline. To be honest, I do not think this is a storyline that they would adapt so early on in MCU Spider-Man's career. However, Sin Eater, being the type of villain that he is, would work really well for this story. However, like I did say, the story itself and how dark it is probably wouldn't work for the MCU at this point in his career. Now going on to my last option, which is number 9, the Beetle. Once again, I do think this villain is probably way too powerful for Spider-Man at this point in his career. However, the Beetle could be a cool villain to use if they nerfed his powers a bit. I think the Beetle is also one of those villains as well, where you can kind of take that character any sort of way you want. You could have him be a high school teacher, you could have him be a scientist, you could just have him be a random mob boss, you could have him be anyone. And he's a character that can be explored in all different ways and can be adapted into different things as well. And I think the basic Beetle power base that comes with the character, I think would be cool to use against Spider-Man in his early days if it was nerfed a bit. However, Beetle I don't think is a likely option either, but he's just an option there as well that they could use in Spider-Man freshman year. Who do I think is going to be the most likely option out of these? Either the Enforcers or Hammerhead, I think, are probably the most likely options you're going to get out of these 9 options. But tell me what you guys think in the comments below. What do you think is the most likely option for the Spider-Man freshman year villain? I want to know all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to hit a like on it. Make sure to hit that subscribe button to not miss any more Spider-Man videos as soon as they come out on the channel. You can be one of the first ones to watch the videos if you hit that bell next to the subscribe button to not miss the videos as soon as they go out on the channel. With that being said, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care and peace.